Hi there, my name is David McRae, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to use visual aids to be a more effective speaker on virtual speaking platforms. The reason for this presentation is that due to COVID-19, we're having to speak online so much more than we did before. This has opened up new opportunities, but also new challenges. We're all getting fatigued with the amount of time we're having to spend on screen speaking and listening to people. And also, we need to find new methods to communicate our message so that people don't get bored and don't take in what we're trying to say. I'm going to share 3 visual aids with you today to be more engaging online. The first visual aid I want to talk to you about is blah, 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 blah. My God, let's get out of here. How agonizing was that? The death by PowerPoint. I'm sure that you've been living through plenty of that, not just during the pandemic, but way before as well. It's common practice in the workplace, in webinars, in online courses to just stick up the slides, block them out with text, and then read them line by line. That's not speaking. That's public reading. And you know how much you don't like death by PowerPoint. None of us like sitting through death by PowerPoint. But when it comes your turn to do a presentation, what do? Usually it's death by PowerPoint again, isn't it? You think that somehow when you do it, it'll be more interesting and more engaging than what came before. Let me tell you, it's a broken method. As they say, you can't polish a turd. Instead, we need to think about a different way that we can engage people. And just because we're virtually speaking doesn't mean that you have to automatically go on to the slides. Slides can have a place. Pictures and graphics are a good use of slides. Blocking out the text, not so much. Instead, what I want to share with you are 3 different ways that you can present your information instead of using those dreaded slides, so that you don't have to resort to death by PowerPoint. So let's rattle through these 3 visual aids. The first one is actually just yourself. Yes, don't be afraid to just speak to your audience through the webcam. In this time of the pandemic and working virtually and having restrictions and not being able to connect with people, we're actually yearning for that human touch even more. It'll be far more interesting for people to look at a person than look at text on a slide. And you have lots of visual abilities that you don't even realize. When you're speaking to the camera, you have your facial expressions, you've got your hands, you've got your upper body language. Yes, there's a little bit of the physical cues that are taken out, but not nearly as much as people would have you believe. There is a lot that you can communicate just through speaking to the webcam. Don't be afraid to just go tech-free and speak a cappella in this way. You'll be surprised at how much more people appreciate seeing and engaging with a person speaking rather than engaging with blocks of text and being read to in that horrible monotone way. So that's your first tip, is just to show up as you are. Forget the slides. Second visual aid that you can use is the cue card. So the cue card, as you can see, is a piece of paper or card, and it contains a keyword or 2. That's the key, a word or 2. We're not doing those blocks of text that you saw earlier. You can speak to the webcam and just bring up a cue card every now and then. What I have is just a massive block of printer paper, and I will choose a few keywords and just prepare a little deck. It might be on the key topics that I'm speaking of. I might be talking about 3 key topics of speaking. Let's say it's confidence, let's say it's body language, let's say it's speech structure. Those would be my cue cards. Confidence, boom. Body language, boom. Structure, boom. And what I love about the cue cards is that it allows you to stay present with your audience. You're not switching from slides and switching back to you speaking. You can just bring it up, and it also keeps your audience on their toes a little bit, because when you are the talking head on screen, if you're not super engaging and the audience aren't really captured by what you're saying, let's face it, sometimes those work presentations, you're having to talk about something that isn't necessarily that exciting. But when your audience know that every now and then you're going to be flashing something on screen that they need to read or they'll miss it, it just engages their attention a little bit more. They know that they've got to keep watching you because you might be bringing things up that give them something different to absorb and ultimately learn from and reflect upon. That's the cue card. So you can use a big stack of printer paper like I do. Another alternative to this, I also have a little small whiteboard like this. And you know, if you want to save the planet, you can just write on the whiteboard, write something, rub it out, and then write something else. Usually I use the whiteboard for things that are a little bit more visual, maybe like a very small diagram or picture or something along those lines. And then I use the printer paper for actual keywords that I'm presenting. So that's your second option, is having some cue cards and bringing some small words and small pictures onto the screen. Option number 3 is the prop. A prop is something that contains a lot more meaning and context than the thing itself. I'll show you an example of a prop I'm using just now in a contest speech. Cat food. Yeah, cat food. I guarantee that when you bring cat food into a speech or presentation, people are going to go, wait, what's going on here? Why are we seeing cat food? David doesn't even have a cat. Why has he got cat food? This prop contains a story and a message in it. And if you watch the speech, you'll find out what the story and the message is. But all of that context and meaning is contained in one single object. And having these objects you can bring onto screen that demonstrate a message or contain a story can add so much more depth and retention to your audience. Rather than just telling them the message or telling them the story, having a really well-chosen prop or object just makes it a little bit more dynamic. It makes it a little bit more interactive and engaging. So the use of a well-placed prop can really keep your audience's attention. And so you can see, you can actually deliver a speech a cappella. And I'll do a webinar or a workshop that's 30, 60, 90 minutes long and not use a slide at all. You don't need to rely on the slides. There's lots of other things that you can use that still make it interactive, still make it engaging, and ultimately give your audience some value. So they're not just reading slides that they could have done somewhere else. They could have done that in their own time. They don't need to be there if you're just reading them the slides. What you need to do is go above and beyond that information, and you're never going to do that if you're just reading the text off the slides. So for your next presentation, webinar, workshop you might be running, whether it's in your job or in your business, have a little bit of courage and a little bit of imagination to say, can I do this without the slides? Can I just show up on the webcam and with a couple of props and pieces of equipment, I can do the whole presentation just as I am. And if you do need a slide here and there for a picture or graphic, that's okay. But don't rely on the deck and don't just swipe through slide after slide, reading and rehearsing. Make it more engaging, make it more dynamic, because ultimately what this pandemic has really shown us is how much we value the human connection. And you're never going to connect with people by reading text them off a slide. Death by PowerPoint does not have to be our destiny, and it doesn't have to be your destiny when you're preparing your next speech.